Hello everyone, my name is Dean and welcome back to the 20 and 20 challenge. This is week 4's episode 1. I realize this has been delayed until Friday. It's kind of because I've, sort of changed what I was planning on doing. I didn't like the way that the project I was working on was working. The sentences are hard. So I decided to go with this approach instead. So I'm going to try and use an API for it, which might be a bit more interesting. But the first step for next week's project, which is now next week's project instead of this week's project, is to create an API and sort of figure out how APIs with Rails work. So for this week, what we're going to be doing is a very basic to-do list application. The catch is we're going to be creating the to-do list application in basic HTML and JavaScript. And we're going to be making requests to a Rails application that's running as an API. So we have our backend, which is the Rails application, which is basically just serving as like the controller for requests and the like models for the database. But there is no front end because when you do the Rails API flag, it is strictly creating the controllers and the models. And then for our front end, that's going to be served out of a just random folder that I have on my desktop where I have like a index.html and an application.js file. So next week, hopefully, if I can get everything working right, we can use the same setup to have a React front end for our to-do list application, and we'll have a Rails backend. So I'll be running a Rails server, and I'll also be running my React project. And then in my React project, I'll make requests to this Rails API. Is this the most efficient way to do things? Almost certainly not. But I feel like this is a great way to sort of learn how to, interact between different projects, use APIs, use different tools for different occasions. And I think it'll be a fun experiment because I have no idea what I'm doing. And hopefully you guys will learn something when I get the videos out where it looks like I do know what I'm doing. But for this first one, all we're going to be doing is creating this little HTML project that gets all of the to-do list items out of the Rails database, basically. And then for part 2, we will go through and we'll actually create a form so that you can create new items in your Rails project with this HTML project thing. So you'll be able to make post requests, basically. And then I don't know, part 3 might be like styling this or something. I haven't really decided yet. But yeah, that's going to do it for me for the intro. Let's move on to some code. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new Rails app, and we'll call this to-do_API, and I'll call mine episode 1. And then we're going to do --API afterwards. And this is going to tell Rails to generate this as an API. So you'll see it remove a whole bunch of stuff here, which is going to be your front end stuff. So your views won't be in the application. And you'll also see that we're not running Webpack when we do this. So now we can cd into todos_API _episode 1. And let's type code dot to open this up in VS Code or whichever editor you would like to use for this. So I'm going to drag this over. And let's now do a sanity check. So let's do a Rails S command. Almost tried to type localhost port 3000 there. So if we do this, and hopefully this starts sometime this year, my computer is having a bit of a hard time today. But if I try to run this, it should say, welcome aboard. Yep, you're writing Ruby on Rails. So this is the same as it usually is. But let's create a scaffold now. So we'll say Rails G scaffold. We'll call this to do. And we'll give each to-do a task of type text. So that's going to generate a couple things. It's going to create the migration, the model. It's going to do some test stuff that we don't care about right now. It's going to do the resources and the controller. The one thing it's not going to do, though, is if we come into app views, you're not going to have a bunch of pages that you can navigate to here. But we can do a Rails db:/migrate command now to add these tables to our database. And then we can, let's create just one of, well, actually, let's leave it blank for now. So let's start the server. So we'll type Rails S to start the server. And then it's still saying we're writing Ruby on Rails, but we can change this either to be our root or we can just go to /todos. So if we come to /todos and I bump this up to 150 so you can see, there's just an empty array right here. And the reason for that is we don't have any to-do list items yet. So let's kill the server and type Rails space C to open up a Rails console. And then let's do todo.create. Let's create one with a task, and we'll say we made this from the Rails console. We can hit enter, and you can see here the transaction was successful, and here's what our to-do looks like. So it gives us our ID, the task, created at, and updated at. So now we can type Control-D to exit, and then let's type Rails S to start the server again. And when we refresh the page this time, we'll have this little bit of JSON right here that has our task in it. The other thing we can do is we can come into our DB folder and our seeds.rb. And in here we can type 10.timesDo end. And we can say todo.create. We'll create a task and we'll say this is a seeded default task. So we can save that. And then we can come over here and we can stop the server again. And then let's type railsdb:/seed. And this will add these 10 tasks to the database. And once that's done, we can type Rails S again to start the server. You can refresh the page, and now you can see that we have a whole bunch of stuff in here. So if we try to find our first task, which we know has an ID of 1, we can go to /todo/1. /todos/1. And this is going to be our individual task. So if I hit F12, for example, and I say let task equal this little bit of noise, we can then do task.task to get the string, because this is just in easy to read format. We can also use this to grab the ID later. So let's say we want to do something like format it so it's like the task ID colon and then the task body right here. So to do that, we would say something like a string with this square bracket, and let me just bump this up so you can see what I'm typing here. So we do the square bracket plus the task.id plus another square bracket to close it off, and then let's do a colon plus the task.task. So something like this. So this is how we can format it. So that's the basic plan of what we're going to do, but I thought it doesn't really make sense to use an API from inside of the same application. It also doesn't really make sense that you would have an API that you only serve similar application stacks with. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a separate HTML little application that just has an index page and some JavaScript. That way it's completely separate even from the idea of Ruby on Rails. But the first thing we have to do for that is we're going to be doing some cross-origin stuff because we're going to be doing it from outside of our local host. So we need to search for the Rails CORS gem. And this should give us rack-cores. So if we open this up, we can scroll down and we can add this to the gem file. So just below Bootsnap, oh, right here, it actually already has it in the gem file. That's pretty funny. So let's save this after we uncomment it, and then let's run a bundle command. So that'll install it. And the next thing we have to do is add this little config bit to our config/application.rb. So what we need to do is we need to come into, I think we were doing the application.rb. So inside of this module and class, and you can see right here all of the framework stuff we have required thanks to Rails. We need to do this config.middleware.insert_before 0. And let me actually bump this up so you guys can see what I'm typing based on the GitHub page. So this is the block we're doing because we're in Rails. Well, I guess we're in Rails 6 now, but we're then going to type rack ::cors do. Then we're going to do an allow do. And if you don't have these things, your application, you're probably going to run into some issues because we're going to be doing some AJAX stuff. Well, I guess we're not really, we're doing X HTTP requests, and it's going to say, request origin headers bad, be better or do better. And this is how we're going to avoid these errors. So we have the origin set to just the wild card, and then the resource is going to be the wild card. and the headers are going to be any, and the methods are going to be get, post, and options, which will allow us to do the get and the post. And when I save this, I'm pretty sure RuboCop's going to fix my formatting here and add in this %i. Like a graceful gazelle. So after we have this %i changed, because I guess this is the better way to do it, we can save this and we can start the server again. And if we come over here and refresh, hopefully everything is still working. Looks like it is. Okay, so that takes care of the rack portion of this setup. The next thing that we should do, I guess we can change which IP address we're running on just so that it's a little bit different. So let's do a Rails S, and I think it's, what is it, -B 0.0.0.0, and then -P for the port, so we'll set it to 3001. So now if I want to come here, I have to type in localhost port 3001/todos. Just trying to show off a couple different things that you can do here. So let me move this over here, and oops, I do need to actually open that. So let me, we have this blank folder right here that we're going to open up with a, I'll open this up in my text editor. Okay, so once we're in here, the first thing we'll do is we'll right-click New File. Let's create an index.html, and let's just create a quick HTML document. So I'll just say doc type HTML, then we'll do some HTML tags, and then we'll give this a head. The head has a meta char set equal to UTF-8. It has a title, and the title we'll just say is my to-dos, or my to-do list maybe. Then we can create a body, and the body will have a H1 that'll just say home page or something. We'll then give it like a div with an ID of container. And then in here we'll just say like to-do number 1 and to-do number 2. And let's maybe do like a BR tag just so that that all looks okay. And then we'll create a footer, which is where we can put in some JavaScript. So let's come over, and I guess we can open this up. And this is what it looks like. So maybe, you know, we can style this a little bit. We'll just give this a style of text align -center, which puts this in the middle. And then maybe we'll give this a style of, I don't know, margin 2em, border of 2 pixel, solid, black. Something like that. Pretty sure I messed that up. There we go. Refresh. So, you know, just something super simple where we can see what what the to-dos are, basically. So, what we can do here is we can replace these to-dos instead of just having the to-dos hard-coded. Like maybe our first to-do, like to-do number 1 is make the bed, and to-do number 2 is record a video. You know, that's a lot of work, so maybe we want to use an API for this so that we don't have to deal with this. Someone else does. So like we just make a call to the API and someone else does some weird database magic. Or maybe you're using like React and you want to use this, you want to use like an API backend or something. This is sort of how you would go about doing something like this. So the first thing we need to do is come down to our footer and let's create a script. We'll say the script type is text/JavaScript. And the src is just going to be, we'll call it application.js. So we'll close this off and VS Code will close off the script tag for us. So we can now save this and then let's create this file. So I think we called it application.js. So let's come into application.js and let's create a function called getTasks. Oops. And let's also call this function down here. So we'll say getTasks. And then let's maybe do like an alert that just says this ran. Refresh the page, this ran. So there you go. That's working. Let's start off by creating a var for our XHTTP. And then we'll say this is equal to new XML LHTTP request. So now we have this request stored inside of our XHTTP variable. And then we'll have like a XHTTP.onReadyStateChange. And we'll set this equal to a function. And we'll just close this off real quick. So let's say if this.readyState is equal to 4 and this.status is equal to 200. So if your ready state is 4 and your status code is 200, then you can like add the JSON stuff. But after that, we come out of here and then we can say xhttp.open. So let's open a GET request. And if we come over to, I guess I closed it, but let me just type localhost port 3001 and then it's /todos. So this is where we want to make our request to. So we'll open up some quotes and inside of this we'll type, well, I guess we'll paste it in. When I copy this, it automatically adds in the HTTP. So http://localhost:3001/todos. And then we want to do this asynchronously, so we can do true. Because you can see right here, it's saying async is a Boolean. So set that to true. So once that's done, and let me just move this over so we have a bit more room to work with. The last thing we have to do is say xhttp.send. And now we'll come over here, we'll refresh the page and everything will work, right? Not quite. We still haven't actually added the JSON stuff. So let's start by, we have our index page, and I'll actually move this down here. So in our index page, we have this div with an ID of container. So let me get rid of these two tasks. So if I refresh, those are gone. Let's grab this container. And because we're not using jQuery, we're going to have to do it with good old-fashioned JavaScript. So we'll say document.getElementById and container. And then we'll say let responses, because we need to actually parse the responses that we get back. So we'll do JSON.parse this.response text. So if I just do a console.log with this.response text, you should be able to see what what it looks like when we get this stuff back. So it's giving us back an array of objects. But if I were to say, let's do something like this. Let's say this.response text, and let's do like window.response text equals this.response text. Something like this. So if I refresh the page, I do the response, and then I can say response text is that whole string. What happens if I try to grab the first element? Well, the first element is just the first element of the string. But if we do this responses thing, so if I say window.responses instead, window.responses, and I refresh the page. Now if I do responses, you can see here that if we grab one of these elements, like let's say I grab responses 0, this time instead of grabbing the first element of the string, we're grabbing the entire object. So here I can say responses.task, which gets us the task or like the ID. So in the same way as before, when we did, we tried to block this in with the task ID. Right here you can see autocomplete. Instead of doing task ID, what we need to do is responses 0.id, and then this one's going to be responses 0.task. So if I do this, it's the same thing, but it's coming from this other server because we're using the server as like as an API, and here we're grabbing this whole thing. So let's get rid of this window responses. Let's switch this back to a let and get rid of this dot. So we're going to have to go through each of these because here we're just doing 0. So let's say for var I equals 0, I is less than responses.length, I++. And then let's do container dot. And now normally you can do like inner HTML, but I'm really not a fan of that because it's kind of destructive. So instead, let's do a insert adjacent HTML. And this takes 2 arguments. The first is where it goes, and the second is what goes where, basically, or what goes there. So first, it's the insert position, and this has a string that you can put in. So you can either put in after begin, after end, before begin, or before end. If you do before begin, it'll go in before the HTML begins. If you do after begin, it'll go after the HTML begins, but before everything else in the HTML. And similarly for after end and before end. So let's do a after begin. So this is going to put it after the container begins. So if we come over to our elements, it's going to put it right in here. If I can edit this as HTML, this is the after begin location. So it's just going to plop it in right there, which is exactly what we want for this. So we'll say after begin, comma. We then need to basically recreate what we have in our consoles here. So we'll start with the square brackets. So we'll do this for the array. We'll append the responses, but this time instead of 0, we'll do i.id. Then we'll do another square bracket with a colon. Then we'll do a plus, and then we'll do responses i.task. So if we save this, and if I refresh this page, it's all here, but it's not like entering a new line each time. And to fix that, we can just add in a BR tag and close it off. And there you go. So now it's adding all of these in the order that we're sort of getting them in. So we get the first one, then we do a before insert, then we do another one, then we do another one. So it's kind of creating like, it's adding these in the reverse order, basically. So there's 2 ways to fix this. The first you could do is like var I is equal to responses.length minus 1. And then while I is greater than or equal to 0, decrement I, right? So refresh, and now it's in the right order, I guess. If the right order for you is oldest first. But that's kind of, really weird to do it like that. So maybe we can do it a bit better. And of course we can. Otherwise I wouldn't be mentioning this. Let's, instead of doing after begin, we can just say before end. And then refresh the page. And you can see here, it does the exact same thing. So if we switch this to after begin, refresh, it is newest first. And then before end, it is oldest first. So it's as simple as just switching this one line, which is sort of why I like this better than just saying inner HTML. Yeah, I think that's probably going to do it for this first episode on using an API from Rails inside of a different application. I don't know what this episode's going to be titled yet, but that's the premise, I guess. So I will see you guys in the outro, and then probably part 2 where we make a form that lets you do the post request. Okay, so that's it for part 1 of this weird API thing. I still don't have a name for this week's episode series thing, so we're just going with weird API thing for part 1, I think. I hope this helped. If it did help, remember to like it so that other people can see it. And if it didn't help, remember to dislike it so that we don't subject other people to bad tutorials. If you guys want to see more of this, don't forget to subscribe. Shameless plug, I know. And I will see you guys in part 2 where we create this form inside of our JavaScript file that's in our HTML application that's working through our Rails API server project thing. Definitely going to have to work on the branding for this week. I'll see you next time.